no grievances that aren't filed ever get resolved. And so you have to file that grievance in order for anything to really happen.
The facts, dates, and events presented in this video are from the member's best recollection and may not be fully accurate. This video is intended for entertainment purposes only. Always consult with your local union about your rights and duties at your workplace. The opinions shared on this video are our own and do not necessarily represent my employer's positions, strategies, or opinions. All views shared are protected under the National Labor Relations Act.
What is going on, everybody? So today I have Greg Kerwood out of Local 25 in Boston, and we're going to be covering, should I file my first grievance? I came across a Reddit post recently where a member was torn. They were a new driver and they were getting their seniority violated left and right. And, you know, people were roasting him in the comments, but I actually, I can relate to this, actually. You know, 20 years ago when I first started driving, probably even more than that, actually, but I basically was a part-timer, started when I was 18, you know, did about 3 to 4 years in, and then I started driving. And to me, that was life-changing money. That totally changed my life. I was very appreciative of it, worked as hard as I possibly could. And I started getting rewarded with running some of the hardest routes. And one route I got on was a complete ball buster. It was not very many people knew it or knew how to run it. And I was not happy. I was absolutely miserable on it. And so I started signing the bid sheets. Even though I was a young driver, I didn't think I was going to win any of the routes. So I just signed every bid sheet. We have bid sheets in our local or in our supplement. So I win it, but nobody tells me I won it. It wasn't until about 3 weeks later, a supervisor felt bad and he told me. And then I talked to my center manager. He's like, oh, just give us some time. We'll put you on it. I knew that nobody else knew that route. So I knew that they were going to drag their feet on it, and they did. And I waited about 3 weeks. And then at that point, I was at my wit's end, and I filed a seniority violation grievance. And that I knew was the only way I was going to get this fixed. And so that kind of comes around to where people kind of hit their wit's end on all of this, where they really are appreciative of the job. They appreciate the money they're getting, but they are stuck in this place where they're just not happy at work. They feel like they're getting taken advantage of, and then their hands kind of forced into that. And that's just my opinion. But Greg, I want to get to you. You know, I'm going to ask you this. What is a grievance?
Well, it's important for people to understand that a grievance is simply a dispute or a disagreement between the union side and the company side. Could be an individual member, could be multiple members, could be an entire local, could be one member of management, could be the entire company. It could be a dispute over contract language. It could be a dispute over treatment in the workplace. It could be a dispute over some legal aspect, safety. You know, it's just any kind of disagreement. And the important thing for people to understand with that is that it's really not a big deal. It's simply starts the process. It's the initial step in the process to get issues resolved. And, you know, people don't really understand what it is. And so they feel sort of timid or some trepidation. And management likes to take advantage of that, right? They try to turn it into a personal beef. You're grieving me for this, or, you know, really you're going to go that far, or we have to go down that path, or whatever it is. You know, which is them trying to turn it into some major thing so that you feel intimidated by doing it. But it's not. It's everything that follows from there comes from that initial grievance, whether it's, you know, going against your discipline language, or, you know, something that you're having an issue with, like you were, where you couldn't get on your route. You know, it's the only way we can hold the company accountable to the contract, to the laws, to the rules, or resolve things that aren't clear, is to start that process. And that process starts with a grievance. Those of us like yourself or myself know that, you know, filing grievances is almost part of the daily routine. It's no big deal. It's not a personal attack on anyone. It's just simply how we start the process to resolve disputes.
And some people believe that everybody that files a grievance, they're just doing it for the money. They're not doing it for any other reason. I mean, what's your thoughts on all that?
Oh, that's completely untrue. I mean, any monetary penalty that anyone would get from our contract exists for a reason, and the reason is that the company's not following the contract. It's not like you can simply spend your time filling out grievance forms, and just rake in cash. The company has to violate the contract in order for a grievance to end up with a resolution that involves payment. But grievances go, way beyond issues like that. I mean, there's payroll issues and there's supervisors working and 9/5s and things like that. But then there are other issues, safety issues, harassment, obviously, which now we get paid for in extreme cases. But it doesn't have to be a monetary thing. It's really the first step in exercising your voice and enforcing your rights in the workplace. And so that's, how it should be taken.
We haven't brought up harassment. There's Article 37, which is harassment. And we always hear the stories online where people feel like they're being harassed. I mean, how would you define that? Like, when should a member file an Article 37 harassment grievance?
Well, there are some distinctions. The company has a right to do their job. They have a right to supervise. They have a right to do a lot of things within reason. For example, they can follow you, but they can't follow you every day, right? They can stand and watch you work, but they can't stand and watch you work for the entire shift, right? They have a responsibility to do their job, but at the same time, there's a line that gets crossed when it comes to harassment. Then there's obvious, kinds of harassment where it's verbal abuse or things like that. But the key to harassment is you want to build a case, right? If it's some incident that happens one time and it's egregious, someone calling someone names or whatever, and it's in front of a crowd of people where you have witnesses, you can make a case for harassment for a one-time incident. But in general, harassment cases are built. They're built, with documentation of incidents, with witness statements, with repeated offenses from the same person, same supervisor or member of management. And in those cases, it's a process, but if you feel that that's what's going on with you, you should get with your steward and, either file for the one incident or start to build your case to protect yourself.
And then let's get to what my situation was, which was seniority violation, which is, I think, the most common reason why people file their very first grievance. And from your experience, if you go up to management, you say, pretty please, can you not violate my seniority? Has that worked out too well?
I would say in general, that's not going to be very effective. Part of the reason we have the grievance process is because it tends to work. Sometimes it's longer than members would like. It depends on your situation and your building and your steward and what kind of manager and how many times they've been beaten up by the union so that they know not to mess around. It can be as simple as you file the grievance and it gets resolved very quickly, or it can be dragged out. But one way or another, that grievance, gets filed and gets heard, and the issue gets argued from both sides, and you come to some sort of conclusion. So it's not. It's the first step in the process, and it's foreign to a lot of new members because they're not coming from an environment where grievances are prevalent, or they're not coming from a union workplace. But it's really, like I said, almost a daily thing. I mean, very few days go by that I don't file one for something. I'm sure, most stewards are the same way. And it's not something to be viewed as, you stepping outside the bounds of something and taking something to the extreme. It really is just an exercise in your rights as a worker under a contract that you should exercise whenever you feel that it's necessary.
And I'm going to go one more, because I see this happen a lot, where somebody will come up to me with a problem and they say, well, I talked to my boss, I talked to the center manager, driver soup, whatever, and they said they're going to fix it and I don't need to file. Now, have you ran into that before, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure every steward has. And, again, coming from an outside environment, you can see how someone would think that that's good enough. But the reality is that grievance also serves as a documentation of the situation and the conversation. The company has to receive the grievance, the steward has to discuss it with them, and that documents it so that when things don't get resolved and don't get done, you have documentation that it was handled. Payroll issues being a prime example, right? Penalty pay does not start if you don't notify the company and file your grievance. And so 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 months later, when they still haven't paid you, you have no right to penalty pay if you haven't filed that grievance. And I think, the best way to put it is no grievances that aren't filed ever get resolved. And so you have to file that grievance in order for anything to really happen.
I think you just gave me my clip at the beginning, but I appreciate that. All right, Greg. Listen, we haven't done a show in a minute. I hope this first one turns out okay. So you let me know in the comments. But hey, Greg, appreciate you. And we're going to get into shout outs. Any shout outs tonight?
Yes, I am going to shout out my brothers and sisters who are down at Air Gas in Hingham. They've been on strike for about a week now. I have not gotten down to that strike line, I'm ashamed to say, because I've been flat out insane busy. But they are out there in the snow, in the wind, in the crappy weather, fighting for their rights, as we always do. And I have no doubt they're going to prevail. So a shout out to them.
All right. And I'm going to give a shout out to the Valley Labor Report. They brought Greg on. I was caught up for the last 2 months. I haven't been able to get on to do anything, but Greg did a really great interview on there. I'll link it down below. And Greg is also on the last TDU webinar, which I will link down below as well. So that's all I got, everybody. Love you, and I'll see you next time.